Moderating this session today. We have our panel of experts, an awesome team, including Dina, who all care in some aspects with our little hero, Karina. And on behalf of all of us in this room, I do really want to thank Dina. I know I thank you over and over again, the Shaw family, every cousin, brother-in-law, sister-in-law who have volunteered to be a part of this. I'm sure grandparents, aunts, uncles, all of you friends, thank you so much for making this happen. I think these last 2 days have just been phenomenal. You guys, everything looks just so seamless. I also want to thank Carrie and Robert so much for their time and talents and helping put this together as well. I am mom to little Alexander, part of the AP group, just like all of you. I have a nursing background. I was a registered nurse by profession. But I have to say that none of my schooling, my master's degree in nursing, science, none of that have helped me as much as my quadruple doctorate degree in parenting with my 4 kids. And with you all as really my true phone friends. So just like we all talk about our healthcare professionals and friends who we meet in the community, and when we tell them about this diagnosis of AP, they kind of give this look like, oh, they don't know how to react, right? And then we're like, okay, how do I explain this in layman's terms and whatnot? Without having that pity party or, it's just a matter of fact, this is who we are. But oftentimes they would say to me, how did you know all of that? And I said, or how did you know to do that? How did you know to try that? And I said, you know what, we have this Facebook support group page that we just put a question out there and you get hundreds of advice. And because we have all lived this every day, it's amazing. But in having a healthcare background, for me, I think my level of empathy has grown so much. I have a maternal child background, so labor and delivery was kind of my specialty. I worked in the NICU and all of those things. But none of this could have prepared me for being a parent of a special needs child. The Chromosome Kids Like Me book has helped me, and I bought that for every single chromosome parent that I've met. I think I've gotten the most purchases on Amazon outside of the doctor's offices. Melanie's book on the Bundle of Joy, I told her I've read several chapters of that over and over again about especially the why worry, that we sit up at night worrying about their future, but in reality there's a greater purpose for them and greater purpose for us, and that's why we're all here today, to kind of live our legacy and put our mark on the world. So this is amazing. Okay, too much time. Let me move forward. All right, so we have some objectives, like all good sessions do. And so by the end of this presentation, we're hoping that our team of experts, with feedback from all of you, because we do want to make this an open-ended session for you guys to post questions to us and comments, is to identify strategies for implementing a high-functioning interdisciplinary team of therapists and teachers, or our care team. And then understand what a pragmatic approach to establishing goals with your care team looks like. So we want to make sure that we're able to get the most participation and function and the abilities of our AP heroes to really enjoy life. We talk about just bombarding them with therapy, intensives, and are we doing the right thing, or should we just lay off? And like little Hannah and Rebecca said, when we laid off, all of a sudden she just started doing things at her own pace. And that's one thing that I tell myself and my kids every day, is that Alexander is learning every single day. And it might be at a slower pace, but every single day he's learning something new, comes out with something new, so that's amazing. And then also to understand the importance of our role as parents and caregivers in establishing open communication amongst our teams. So recognizing that a lot of us have care teams that might not all be conveniently placed in the same outpatient facility or even in the same medical center, and how do we bridge communication between our speech therapists, our occupational therapists, physical therapists, if that becomes a challenge for any of you. and any insight that you guys might have in strategies that you've seen successful would be great to hear as well. So a little bit about our team. We have Lorraine Janowski. She's a pediatric board certified occupational therapist. We have Nicole Stewart, who's a special education teacher and board certified behavior analyst. I'm not sure many of you have enlisted the help of ABA services for your child. Eileen Connell is a pediatric speech and language pathologist. Dr. Arsenio Paez, pediatric physiotherapy, pediatric rehabilitation. He's the one that loves the research scholar. And Dr. Green, evidence-based medicine, which we're always looking at the latest and greatest evidence-based practices. And then Adrienne Miliotis is a board-certified behavior analyst as well. And our champion parent, 8P, Dina Shaw. I did want to make sure that you all knew that there are some handouts at the registration area about some, our panel has put together.
They've gone out now.
They've gone out now, okay. So they put together some great information for you. And in-depth information about each of our panelists are on their bio pages. All right, so understanding that each of you on the panel plays a key role in Karina's care, I just thought it would be good for us to get your perspective on, what's your role on the care team for each of your disciplines, and what do you feel you bring to the table for Karina? Anyone can start.
So I because I'm Karina's physical therapist, her physiotherapist, in one sense my role is really to help promote her ability to move and strengthen. But I think one thing that we all bring to her team is this desire to help Karina be as independent as possible and to have all the experiences that a child of her age would have and to be able to enjoy them and participate in all of them. So I think part of my contribution to the team is bringing that perspective in and also making sure that we all have that in common, because we really do all have many of the same goals. We just approach them with our own individual strengths.
I'll speak next. So I'm Karina's occupational therapist. So I work with Karina in her home as well as we do aquatics in the pool, which is a wonderful adjunct for children as well as land-based therapy. So one of the things that I work on with Karina is we work on some fine motor skills. We also a lot of overlap with what Arsenio does, what Eileen does in speech therapy in regards to working on that postural control, working on what really makes her tick, what's motivating to her. I would be doing Karina, and any child I work with a disservice if I'm not using the tools that work for them. So where is their buy-in? Sometimes the greatest therapy sessions, you have a plan in the back of your mind, and it's what the child wants to do and how can you take those activities and make them functional for the child. So as an OT, I work on functions, fine motor development, visual motor, and just postural control as well.
I can speak next. Adrienne Miliotis, one of two BCBAs working with Karina. So we work on the applied behavior analysis ABA aspect of Karina's team. There are actually several ABA therapists that work with Karina. So as a BCBA, one of our roles is to coordinate all of those therapists together, making sure within ABA that they're working on the same goals, using the correct procedures, and then as a broader view of the BCBA, because we're all working on each other's goals, but particularly in ABA, we work on speech, we work on physical therapy goals, so coordinating across the providers, getting feedback from them on their goals, and then going back to my team, and making sure that my team is implementing the cross-disciplinary goals according to how the PTOP speech module is implemented.
Adrienne did a great job describing what a BCBA does. Just to piggyback off of that, I oversee Karina's school-based placement team, which includes ABA therapists, as Adrienne mentioned, additional occupational therapists, additional speech therapists, and additional physical therapists. And so kind of being the overhead, making sure that everybody, if we're working on one skill, that everybody's targeting it in a similar way, that all of her goals are aligned with each other. And as a special education teacher, I literally sit there and look through every single other goal document to make sure if somebody's working on communication, somebody else is working on communication in a similar complementary way. And then kind of how all that applies to how Karina learns and how she makes progress in an educational setting, whether it's towards social education or pre-academic education or communication education, kind of putting all of those pieces together.
Okay, I'm Eileen. I'm officially speech and language, but I kind of prefer communication specialist because there's so much to communication that is not just speech or not a language system. So I think a big role on my team is to do some family education and team education around that. And also, speech therapists can work kind of fully medical or fully educational, and I kind of like to be in the middle to maybe try to connect OT and PT with the behavioral teacher part of things, because I have some experience in both, so I try to bridge that gap. Karina has other speech therapists that have different areas of expertise, oral motor and feeding, and she has another speech therapist that's also a BCBA, like Adrian and Nicole, so we all tried to work together. Oh, and she has another one who for AAC. So speech therapists can have expertise in very much smaller areas in the larger disciplines. So it's important for us to all work together so we can share our different expertise. And oral motor. Yes, I think I said. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing just to throw in too that's interesting is that we all have these perspectives, but we do this in a variety of places because life and growth and development won't happen just in a hospital or in a clinic. You know, we do this all at home, in the playground, in the museum, in the park, sometimes even in other settings. And that's, I think, one strength as a team, and also that's very helpful in thinking of this, is that development in life and growth happens everywhere. It doesn't have to happen in one spot. And it's important to make sure that these opportunities happen everywhere, as we all have.
Especially as an occupational therapist, like our main goal is to help a child function in their natural environment. Right, so if I'm working on a child, helping them start to do independent dressing, or just starting to put one arm through the sleeve, you're better off doing that where the child normally does it. It's in their bedroom, or if you're helping them with grooming in their bathroom, as opposed to in a clinic setting or in a place that's really not their natural environment. It's something as simple as that can really have that can really help the child carry that over and help them do it more on their own.
So I find it interesting about how you guys are aligning your goals. And so how do you informationally know about what each other are working on? Do you work with the same common medical record system? Or you all have access to those tabs?
That's a great question. So we actually all work for different, either privately or different agencies. So we do my center, which is Karina's primary placement. We offer clinical team meetings every 6 to 8 weeks, where we all get together to make sure that how we're targeting things is similar, and to review all of those systems, how she's doing, with Adrian in her preschool, in her typical classrooms, versus how she's doing with Eileen in her speech and communication sessions. And it's really important that we all are there, we're all available, we send team meeting notes afterwards so that we're all able to review them. We do all have goals that we're working on that we also share the paperwork, but I think a lot of the FaceTime is really paramount to that success.
And we also all email, because sometimes you can't get together, and so we email each other, and we email as a group, and sometimes we even just run into each other or make sure that we have a little overlap, because I know in some times I've worked with groups or with teams where we're in different cities, or different countries even, but we're working together, and so we do a lot of that kind of emailing and texting just to keep in touch.
And to add from a practical perspective, we've had a lot of trial and error with
Yes.
this, with actually what it means to collaborate in this way, because we all are, we're not all in the same building together. We tried through text messages, that didn't work because no one wants their phone digging every 5 minutes. We tried Google Doc, that didn't work, in the end, communication book, that didn't work because what if you're running out and you don't have time to write in it, have to go back and forth. So in the end, what we finally settled on was a group email chain. And so the first person that works with Karina in the morning starts the email chain, writes a few notes, sends it out to everyone, and then as the day goes on, everyone just replies all with their notes. And then we have a nice handy thread for each day that everyone's notes in it. So of course your mileage may vary with that, but the point is try out different things, see what works best for your team, and maybe you can learn a little bit from what has and has worked for us.
I was going to say we ended up having Karina's own Gmail address, and so everyone kind of emails Karina, and then Mabel and I have access to that, so we review that. We don't necessarily read them every day. I mean, I skim it quickly, but at least my goal is pragmatically, like by the end of the week, by Friday, I have like 5 good emails or kind of daily notes, tidbits of what Karina worked on, and then hopefully, I presume that everyone's not reading them every day, but by the end of the week, they're kind of like, okay, this is what Karina's working on, interesting. I have some questions here, let me modify this, let me kind of start the beginning of next week with this perspective. So, we keep it really simple and short, but it's really useful and it's really easy to track too. So, if I had a question like 3 months ago, what was she doing? In her Gmail, quick, okay, now I know what she was doing. Didn't really work. These last 3 months, that method wasn't really effective. It's not how she learns. I know we have like a team meeting in person at least once every 3 to 4 months, and that's been really helpful. And sometimes Karina's there where they can actually show what Karina, how they're actually, or we show videos, so it's been really helpful. I think yesterday in the green room breakout, we had talked about what motivates our kids and how many of them have that lazy, for lack of a better word, just that they're just happy with everything and nothing motivates them, whether it's a brand new toy or food. And then one of the speakers had said, how many of your kids did you feel like that? And Alexander's in the room like, it was just, but I think for our team at home, we had to be very cued into what motivated him at that moment. So he was motivated by wanting to go outside. And so at that moment, it was, do you want to go outside? High five, do this. And he did it because he wanted to go outside. But it was really being able to capture those moments. I mean, just like we all do, though our kids are nonverbal, we look at them and say, oh, did you want a cookie? And that little eyebrow up is yes, right? We just know. And so I think being flexible and very in tune and kind of assuring the team and giving them that flexibility has helped me personally.
I just wanted to add that I actually do read the emails every day, and I know Nicole does too, because there's a lot of good information in the moment, even if we're not talking about a long-term objective or a long-term goal. For example, did Karina eat her breakfast with her first therapist? Is she going to be hungry when she gets to Adrian at her next school? And then when I get her at dinner, is she just going to be totally exhausted because she went on a field trip that day? And it's really important to know those little things, especially for long-term therapy goals. Karina loved this activity on Friday. Why does she hate it on Monday? Oh, well, mom might have mentioned in the email that she hasn't had a bowel movement in 3 days. So all of those things are really important for day to day. So I do read the email. So keep writing.
And we're also a very dynamic and flexible team. So we all, if we find, okay, right now this week, the YouTube is the thing, it's the motivator, then we can all adjust to it. Or if today's been a hard day or a good day, we're very dynamic and in tune. So we kind of, as a group, we kind of morph into one big, system, and we adapt together.
And I think the other important piece is this didn't all happen overnight. No. I think when you first start working with a child, that it's really easy to just avoid collaboration, and you really have to push it, and you really have to force everybody to make a connection, because it all ends up being, I read the emails and I laugh when I see something in somebody else's session, or when Karina first started walking, I watched every single one of those videos over and over again, and everybody sent them, and it was an amazing moment for the whole team. You don't get to this color coordinated, amazing, overnight. It takes communication, it takes a lot of effort, especially in the beginning, to get to know each other and get to know each other's styles, to be able to just email back a quick oh my God, that's great, or can you clarify on this really quickly, and feel comfortable with the rest of your team to be able to do that.
And I think that's an important hallmark of our team. It's not to have a team where you say, you can't do that, that's what I do. Or you should, or I can't do that, that's what you do. It's really that we're all in this together and we all do together.
And by the way, I just wanted to say, this isn't just her team. There's like 10 to 12 other individuals that work with her. So it's a pretty large team, and it's taken us a lot of trial and error. So we're just a small sample of what a team is. And clearly, I think that Nicole and I are a big part of this team, and so we'll also get to that. But I just wanted to highlight that, they're encouraging, and they really want us to be involved. So it's empowering, and it's a lot of effort and hard work at the same time. I often want to retire, it's a cool dynamic, and so I'm really grateful. And I just think that depending on the country and wherever we are, that if you can have a snippet and really be involved, and feel free to ask them questions later on too about it.
If I can just, one more short thing about the way these emails function is that it's really nice, the pictures and the videos has come up several times. So it can be even as something as, for example, Arsenio and I often co-treat. So if Arsenio is walking on the way to prompt Karina to sit down, then I can take a little picture of that, and then you can send that in an email. This is where you put your hand, this is how you position yourself, in a really short snapshot, and that can go out to everyone. And so immediately everyone is doing it that way.
So in the beginning of a special needs child's life, they have early intervention. Typically in New York, we have early intervention, and we have a big amount of caregivers and coordinators that all work together. Once the child gets into the school system, things totally change. And so how is it that, now we live out in the country, very, very small population, how is it that you were able to, you're in the city, so it's easy, but for the other families and for the families that are coming in brand new, how is it to start having that control? Because I have the control with a nurse, but I know that a lot of our kids don't. So could you tell them how you started the care team, or who started the care team?
Yeah, no, that's the question.
Well, when you're younger, you start out with more like the early intervention. They were all cohesive and like that. So then as we got to school, it just falls apart, and nobody talks, and nobody,
Right.
It seems like the older you get, the less and less they get.
So the comment was that when they're younger and you have early intervention, all of those kind of therapies and things line up. They're all in sort of the same place. And then once they're school age, oftentimes there's communication breakdowns, and it's hard to get everyone on the same page. And those are some of the challenges.
Well, one thing I know because I've worked in all different age groups and settings, and one thing that I know is difficult is that the way that the systems are set up, it makes it harder to get that communication. But one thing I always remind everyone is that we are there to help you, no matter who it is, whether it's the physiatrist or the physical therapist, the speech therapist or the medical director, it doesn't matter. We are there for you. You can drive that team, and you will find, I think, sometimes people who think, I know what I'm doing, but that's not the right person. And I've never met in my 27 years working someone to whom a small conversation saying, I really want to be more involved in what's going on here, that doesn't help. Because I think, but it's important to remind people. I think it becomes for all of us even, it becomes easy, I think, sometimes to forget that we are there for you and for the family. So one thing I do know to help is sometimes just to remind people, I don't know what's going on during the day.
Most of my background is most autism, and I came in saying we have to do this and we have to do this and we have to do this, and she said no, that's not how he learns differently. And it's really trusting that she knows, and she knows her child. She was the one who taught him to walk. She knows him, she knows how he learns. And it's really understanding that yes, I might be the expert on ABA, but she is the expert on her child and how he learned, and also I think a lot of times what I learned, especially from both that child and from Karina, is that to present. I think somebody said it earlier that everybody seems really happy. I think Mary Carmen said it earlier. Seems really happy. There's not a lot of motivation. When that motivation is there, you really see a much higher skill level and a lot more. And I think a lot of your children all of your children are very smart, are very intelligent. They're taking in a lot. They might just not be putting it all out there, what they're taking in. And it's really looking at how do you capitalize on that motivation and that interest to actually see what they're learning and what's going in, as opposed to just continuing to drill and assume that it's because they don't understand. Because I really do believe that all of your children understand a lot more than we can necessarily understand.
Can I do one? I'm going to go rogue off the slide and say medical issues. I wish I had known to ask a little bit more about different medical issues for what I touched on before. If your child is having a GI issue or a low fever or a rash in their diaper, or they have sleep issues and they haven't slept in a few nights, all those things are really important for me to know when I come to do a session and I'm expecting this child to do their best. So I think to share that kind of information with your therapist is important.
Sounds great. All right, question 3, moving right along. So what advice would you give to families, and this may address some of the questions that you had from question 1, what advice would you give families who are either establishing or evaluating the effectiveness of their team? So we Arsenio had pinpointed about, no, that's not how you do things. It's like, you're off the team.
Yeah.
But parents we are the driver, and like it or not, we are highly involved in all of this as coordinators of care. And then it's tough to find a good match for the family, and it kind of puts us in a position that, if we say this BCBA is not the ideal person for us, we just aren't jiving, then you worry about contacting the supervisor and saying, is there somebody else that might be available without hurting feelings? It's just not working. And then you're worried, oh, now I'm going to be put on a waiting list, and now he's not going to get any therapy for a while. So it's kind of a balance that I can appreciate that I've done it myself. But for parents who are establishing their team, what advice would you give for us?
So I wanted to just also acknowledge that a lot of us are not in the same, town, state, country. All of the rules and the guidance and the opportunities we have are very different, right? So, and also definitely kind of across the pond in Europe, depending on literally locally where you are. It's a big continent, but if you're from New Zealand and we mentioned a lot of other countries over and over again, but I think that we acknowledge that, this is, the goal of this is that, as providers talk to the care team, explain, as a parent, I don't always have a choice, right? And even, year on year, it's always such a challenge for our family to find, how does screen learning, how do we get that setting, and how do we afford it? Because cost is a big factor. And we definitely struggle. We think about this all the time. And, unfortunately in New York City often you have to have a special needs attorney. And that attorney, sometimes you have to pay out of pocket, sometimes you don't, and work in that I can get reimbursement. Then the attorney takes some fees from that reimbursement. Some attorneys work pro bono. I'm not an expert depending on which town you live in, but this is something that we've had to fight very hard and work very hard with our attorney to be able to get reimbursement for some members you see here and other members that are not even here. Some of our health insurance covers some of the services. Sometimes, we find other ways that we have a Medicaid waiver. So without getting into so many specifics, we have 4 to 5 different buckets of how we can pay for this really amazing team. And it's challenging. Every couple of months we revisit this. And they know, because they've been, guiding me sometimes, and we have very serious discussions that I don't know if I can keep sustaining this amazing team. At some point, we're not going to be able to afford this. And so I just wanted you all to know that I truly understand that each of us here truly respect and realize that we're all coming from different places, and that hopefully we can all learn a little bit and help each other, and hopefully with some of Project 8P's overall goals, help support to fight and give you ammunition for the services that our children deserve. So that's kind of my broad picture.
And one thing I would throw in also, it's important, trust your instinct, because it doesn't matter if someone comes in with a wallpaper full of diplomas. If they're not the right person for you or your child, and it doesn't seem like they understand you and your child, that's not the right person. Qualifications are important, but qualifications does not make a good therapeutic relationship. And I'll give you a quick example. It's just a random one. Many, many years ago, there was a study at Harvard where they took people off the street and said, "Can you watch this 5-minute little video on my phone? What do you think? Does that guy know what he's doing?" And it was, something like a surgery. Then they had a whole bunch of experts rate them. Guess what happened? They were in agreement, almost 99% agreement. Meaning that sometimes this is the right person for me or not. But that person really has to blend. This is going to be someone in your life and in your loved one's life. So I would say, trust your instinct. It has to feel like the right person, and you're almost always going to be correct.
And I also think with that, don't be afraid to speak up. I think that the parents I form the best relationship with are the ones who hold me accountable and are the ones that advocate for their child. At the end of the day, it is your child. I feel like Karina will always be a part of our lives and will have always had an impact on our lives, and hopefully vice versa. But we will not be with Karina every day, all day, forever. And it's really, you want to make the best decision for you. And I don't want to say don't care about our feelings or the feelings of the educators. You want to be polite and collaborative, but at the end of the day, it's your child, and it's okay to advocate. And don't feel that it's not, and don't feel that if somebody feels hurt by that, that hopefully it's a learning lesson for them to be able to be stronger for the next time this comes up, and so that they're able to be a better educator, unfortunately, the next time, and hopefully you're able to find somebody who is a better fit for your child's team.
I would add, piggybacking a little bit on what Cindy said about degrees aren't everything. I would also add, especially for our AP heroes, that rapport is not always everything. Rapport is, of course, important, but we know that many of our AP kids are super social and super smiley. So just because your child likes a therapist, it's not enough. Your child has to be able to make progress with that therapist. That therapist has to be able to motivate them, be able to teach them, be able to come up with appropriate goals. Certainly, if someone can't make your child smile, they're out. Because just about everyone can, but it's not enough. There has to be progress towards goals.
And it has to make sense. What's taking place has to make sense, because sometimes what I know I've come across is that someone will say, "Oh, I'm working on this wonderful technique you've never heard of," and it makes no sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, I don't know how it will make sense to anyone else sometimes. Yeah. But if it doesn't make sense to you, ask, "Well, I don't understand. Why is this going to work? Or why are you doing it?" And if they still can't explain it, that may not be someone who should be doing that. Because it has to make sense to you. And if someone can't explain it in a way that makes sense, something's very wrong. But it's not with you, it's with what they're doing.
And also you want to ask what kind of standardized testing are they used, because you want some objective information. Sometimes in the therapy world with all of us, some of what we do can be a little objective and it can be a little gray. So you want to ask, what standardized tests are you doing? Are you doing it every 6 months or a year? Are they making progress objectively? Just so you have some standard form of measure. When we work with children through insurance, not necessarily education-wise, but also when we're trying to get funding through your private insurance companies, they want us, when we write letters of justification and progress updates, they want to see progress. So it has to be measurable. So if you're not sure what standardized test, ask them. Say, what are you testing? Are you testing fine motor coordination? Are you testing visual motor? Are you looking at their sensory systems? Are you looking at how they're following directions? Are you looking at their strength? So that kind of makes it a little bit more clear.
And what are the goals? Because I think sometimes it's interesting. Someone might say, "Well, what are your goals?" And they may say something you think, "But we did that last year." It's important to set goals, but to set goals that make sense to you and to your child or your brother or your sister or whoever it is. The goals have to be something that we come up with together, but they have to be goals that you want worked on. It can't just be, "We're going to work on sitting." Well, but we've been sitting. It's really that we are there to help and serve you, not the other way around.
I want to add something to go along with what Bina was saying about coming from different areas with different resources, and also it will address the AP mom in the second row about how as your child's getting older, it's harder to collaborate. So the first decade of my career, I was only working for state-funded agencies, and I had giant caseloads, and you can still make it happen. You don't be afraid to ask for it. Don't be afraid to ask your school SLP to email or make a quick call to your hospital OT for 5 minutes just to connect. Just keep asking. Like, the worst that could happen is that they will say no, and that will be frustrating, but maybe the third time you ask, they'll realize how important it is to you. And once a therapist forms a connection with another, it's really just more fun to work. So now we all know each other, and I can just send like a one sentence email, like no punctuation, to ask a quick question instead of thinking like, oh, I have to write this like very professional 3-paragraph thing, so how to prompt Karina to say hi. But really, I'm just like, just mouth it, And so you can get to that point. Just keep asking for it. I had one dad who only wanted bullet point information. So the whole team just wrote bullet points. Like, my emails are huge narrative stories, but I was like, okay, I have to write a bullet point. This is so hard. But he asked for it several times. and so just keep asking so people know what's important. Yeah.
Ask for homework. Tell your therapist you want something to do. Give me something to work on. One thing, can only be one thing, and if they are able to give you something, if they tell you, well, you don't need to do that, red flag.
For us, our kids are so busy, and a lot of us have more than one child, right? So we do have to make decisions as to what we're going to do. Our family, we had to make a decision. We had the behavior therapy happening, and they recommended maximum amount of hours, and I thought, this is a great opportunity before he starts kindergarten. Let's tackle potty training. And so 4 to 5 hours Monday through Friday, I had to drop OT. I work full-time. I have 3 other kids. I have a husband too, who's helpful. But I also rely on grandma and grandpa, and the behavior therapy happens in their home, and so I have to be respectful of their time too, because they help me so much with that. But I had to let go of OT because I was like, I can't have grandma driving him to OT for the hour. Our speech insurance had said that he's reached his lifetime cap for speech therapy. He's had a total of 2 6-month sessions. And I said, I go, well, you know what? Not a hill I'm willing to die on yet. Because we know it's a long talk on the phone and whatnot. But I said, we're going to focus on the behavior therapy, and we're going to encompass all of those things. So I went back to my team and I said, thanks so much. We'll probably see you again soon. We're transitioning to this. What can we work on? And so occupational therapy gave me those bullet points. We've been working on this, give this to behavior therapy. Speech gave me those little bullet points. Let's keep enhancing all of these. And inevitably we just keep working with those little therapies here and there. As we met with the school, they started establishing those goals, and I had to really sit back and go, whoa, I think that goal is not a realistic goal, because for one, he doesn't know how to separate colors or objects. So they said, well, we could set the goal of him separating, the red circles with the blue squares. And I was like, whoa, that's like 4 different things. He has to know what red is, he has to know what blue is, he has to know what a square is. It's too much. And they said, how about just cars and blocks? That's more realistic. I'm willing to do that one. Let's do those 2 objects. And they're like, perfect. But again, we just have to, it's exhausting. But for me, I pick my battles, and what's going to give me a little bang for my buck, what's motivating to me, and how much time do we truly have? And a lot of times when we put the pressure off of our kids, we know that they're still learning anyway. All right, next question, we ready? All right, question 4, which kind of tags on a lot of what we've already had said, but we think about what brings joy to our kids and gives them meaning in their day-to-day when they're happy with everything anyway. But how could our care team help us? And what would you guys give as an example of what goal alignment looks like? So I kind of talked about knowing those 2 objects and being able to separate those. So we work with those at home. I told them about that at the school, and then maybe when we're out at the grocery store, we're pointing out, oh, look at those blocks, look at that color, whatever it is. But have you guys established some goal alignment that would transition from home to school to community?
And there's
Any comments about that?
I think Adrian actually, I'm throwing Adrian forward because I know that we've had a lot of them around things like, helping Karina be able to initiate walking somewhere to go to something she wants and being able to communicate with her peers. And I know, so I think I'm pushing you forward as someone, and Nicole, as someone who really...
Yeah, I think we can really dissect any of the goals that we work with. Even something, I know we brought up pointing before, so we wanted to teach Karina to point. So what does ABA bring to that? Well, ABA brings to that we can start to look at her motivation. Why is she pointing? Because she wants something. What does she want? ABA also has the advantage of being able, sometimes more so than the other disciplines, to be able to work in the community. So going out with the caregiver, going out with Bina, and showing her when you're out and about with Karina, how can you work on this skill with Karina? And then I guess we can kind of go down the line and say what everyone else has been for that specific goal, been able to bring that we all worked on across each other.
Well, one of the things that we've been working on is I work with Karina in her home and also in the pool, and kind of collaborating with what everyone has been working on. The pool is a wonderful place to work on a variety of those things. So about several months ago, before Karina, actually before she was independently walking, I'd say maybe about 6 months ago, we would practice walking from where the stroller was, or closer to the beginning where the pool was, walking barefoot on a slippery surface. So here she was walking with some support. She was walking on a wet, slippery surface, and then how can that translate into every day? Well, you think when a child takes a shower, they step out of the shower, their feet can be wet. So you're working on a variety of different environmental factors, not just with socks and shoes on, but barefoot, wet, working on her balance and her control, and how can we relate that therapy session into everyday life, which it clearly was, as well as other kids, other kids in the pool that were a little distracting. Also the way the sound hits the pool and it kind of echoes off the wall. All these other environmental factors that really made it a very realistic situation for a little girl with her brother Dylan, who's in the pool area as well. So it's kind of like putting all of that together and making it real, not just a therapy session, and as well as making it fun.
And in context of pointing, one thing that we worked on is, okay, if we want her to be able to point to something she's interested in, but when should we be doing this? Maybe we should take a walk first, because then you're moving, you're thinking, your juices are flowing. But then where should we be pointing? Or should we be pointing here? That's a bit of a challenge. Should we be pointing down there? That's hard to do. Let's point, for instance, thinking about what things would make this work better. Let's point at eye level. Should we have two things to point at next to each other? So you're looking side to side, or is it easier to look up and down? Should we be speaking at the same time? Probably not. That's too many things to focus on. I hear you. What do you want? What do you want? Look at this. Quiet. I can't concentrate. I want to point. So those are, from my point of view, things that we worked on together from the motor planning, coordination, physical therapy point of view. Not just are you strong enough, but how can we structure the task to help this happen better?
And I think to build on that with the pointing example, it's also so when PT or senior PT gets to a point where it says, okay, she's able to point and cross midline, or she's able to point up. It's really knowing how we're collecting data on it or how we're analyzing it and really breaking it down so that when we all go into a team meeting and we say to Bina, Karina's pointing, it's not just this big global Karina's pointing, because then when Bina gets home and Karina's not pointing, it's really disheartening. You don't understand why she's not pointing. It's because she's able to point when you hold up one item in front of her and it's at her eye level, and you don't say anything, and it's her favorite item in the world and she hasn't seen it in 2 weeks. And that's a huge building block to eventually being able to just say, yeah, Karina can point to whatever she wants in any field or anywhere, but it's really knowing how we break that down and how we operationalize that so that the parent knows exactly what to expect, and so the rest of the team knows exactly what to expect, so that a new person doesn't come in and just expect if Karina wants something really high up, she's able to do it. She might not be there yet.
I'm just going to use the example of initiation. So Karina's working on walking and talking and all these skills, but across disciplines, she's working on doing them without being prompted. And just through so that's one thing that we all have in common and we can do across sessions and across school and at home. And then trickle down to with family when there's usually more things going on than just working on your child's goals. So our CEO and I accidentally overlapped on Monday. So we were just, it was an accident.
Actually a really wonderful
But it was wonderful because we realized we're both working on her just initiating anything, a vocalization or a movement. So we just kind of ran around and crawled around and hid and found each other. And it was initiation, and it's going to benefit all of us, and it's going to benefit the family when they go to a restaurant and Karina wants her cup and she initiates reaching for it. So just being aware of each other's goals, you don't even have to decide you're all going to work on something, but just being aware of what other disciplines are working on can help inform your own work and can help the family know what to expect when they're alone with the child.
Everything all of us does enriches what we all do. So we are growing also, and what we do transforms and changes based on what we're all doing individually and together.
Okay. To switch gears a little bit, a lot of us have looked into intensives. How many of you have looked into intensives? We'll go into that very next point. So, and I know that some have traveled to California to the Napa Center, right? So if you come to the Napa Center, then it's barbecue at my house to follow. Okay, so next question is question 5. Could the panel help the audience understand what are intensives, if they are helpful in your opinion? So this is again your opinion, and then what methods should families be wary of? Like, should we not drink the Kool-Aid for?
I'm going to be a bit jumpy on this one because I've had a lot of experience with this, and I think, look, here's something no one would debate. The more you practice something, the better you get at it. And one of the things I teach at the university is how your brain learns and how it adapts and how it makes new connections. And we know for sure the more you practice something, the better it gets. But the one thing I would caution you is that doesn't mean that practicing something 40 hours a week over and over again is what causes that, because it's not necessarily always natural. The things that will make the most impact are when you as a family and you as a person practice something, and you practice a few times and you do something different, then you take a break, then you practice it again, and then you do it in many different places. I have to stand up because I'm not a sitter by inclination, but for instance, one thing there is you have this little boy and he's hanging. Your brain doesn't think of that and think, oh, I can walk. Your brain thinks, oh, now I know how to hang. And so one of the things I would say is that for me, it is a wonderful thing to do intensive work, but at the same time, it also has to make sense in the context of your life. I have not found the research yet to show, and I'm a big research guy. I bore the hell out of people when I get into research. And they might run away from me, but I've not yet found research that says if you spend $40,000 in mortgage your house and half divorce your husband and make yourself miserable, to go do 2 weeks of intensive suit or whatever it is, that your child will do better. What really makes a difference is practice something that makes sense. If you want to practice walking, it has to be walking. The park, the playground, the bookstore, the museum, here, your grandmother's house, that's intensive. It doesn't have to be always that you bankrupt yourself emotionally and physically to do something. And one thing I will say is also, any approach that says to you, this is the only approach, if you do this and only this, you will get better, or you cannot do anything else, so you do this, that's bullshit, pardon my French. Because, that's not how the brain works, and we know from daily life, anyone who says, I'm the only answer, look how cute I am, I have all your answers, that's not really helpful. So I would say, and it is good to have intensive work, but it doesn't have to be that kind of thing. You can do intensive work by just practicing many skills in your normal everyday environment in many different ways. And I'm a bit passionate to make sure that that is a message we get, because not everyone can do these things. And sometimes they're wonderful, but you're not withholding anything by not being able to do them. The important thing is to think of what we're doing and do it as many different ways as possible, not necessarily always in a package.
Rocky training regime.
What's that?
The Rocky's training.
Yes, exactly. Very, very true. If you've seen Rocky, that'll be it. Yes.
We are doing intensive session for Veronica in the music therapy.
Yes.
And we're doing 1 week intensive with the physiotherapist. And after that, because she's living very far from us, we have to cross the country to see her. and she gives us exercise at home, so we're doing it, and we also try to implement this exercise in everyday life, like when we walk with her, we try to, catch her from her legs, then from her shoulders. Do you think that in this case, intensive therapy can be useful?
I think it's useful if you can implement it, if it makes sense to you. If you want, for instance, if the goal is for someone to be able to walk up the stairs, then it should be something that makes sense. It looks like walking up the stairs, and it's something that you can do. Because for me, if it's an intensive thing that requires pulleys and contraptions and equipment, and someone says to you, you can't do that, you're not certified, that's not intensive anymore. That's a wonderful moneymaker for the system. But it has to be something that you can implement at home. It has to be something that, because if you can, you know what the secret is? One person one time figured out that if you do something for 70 odd hours, it has a way of over a month it can stick. But when you leave the intensive, it ends. It has to be something you can do at home, and it makes sense for you to do at home. Because that's where the growth happens, and that's where the change happens. It's not when someone comes to my clinic somewhere, it's at home, it's at the bookstore, the playground. So it can be helpful as long as it makes sense to you and you can implement it. Yeah.
I was just going to add my input for that is just to be wary of intensive that don't include a parent component. If you are not learning anything, then I don't think it would be worth it. I know there's a lot of great feeding intensives that people go to where children really just need to learn to eat and swallow for survival, but the parents don't have there's not a good parent component, so that makes it more difficult to carry over at home. So I think if you are going to look into an intensive, and like you said, you're getting homework, that's a really important part of it.
So cost-benefit analysis, is it worth it for us? Can our family do it, right? Will we still love each other after? Are we getting a second mortgage on the house? No. Okay, so that's great advice. And also, is it applicable to our day-to-day life? And making sure that, and something that we're willing to do at home as well. Thank you. All right, so this is one of our last questions because we're running out of time, but I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that our panelists will still be looking around the conference, so if you have specific questions or comments, that would be helpful. And again, write down your questions for us in the end, so if we don't get to them, we will address them in the future. So question 6 is, what advice can you give the audience on what to prioritize when everything's important? Right. Everything's important, how the heck?
Yeah. So it's something I do with the teachers that I work with, where I say, what are the 3 things that you want this child to learn over the next year? What are the 3 big, let's just say, big global things? Like, I want them to be able to tell me what they want, or I want this child to be able to go to the bathroom independently, something like that. And then we look to break those down. I think it's really, you have to think like, what over the next, if I look back after this year, what do I want to be able my child to have learned? If there's one thing that's the most important, or 2 things or 3 things, what is that one thing? And for all of you, that's going to look different, because all of your children are unique and all of your families are unique. So it's hard for me to say prioritize this one thing, because that might look different. Your child might be further toward, I think Mary Carmen's example where they had to stop OT for a while. I'm sure at some point you said, okay, my child's, their occupational therapy skills are a little bit ahead. Let's really take some time to work on the educational and behavioral skills. And it's kind of bringing everything up to a similar level so that you can say, like, what needs the most? Sometimes the things that are the hardest need that most attention, and really focusing on those pieces.
And that really ties into having really clear